Most of the teams that needed a quarterback this offseason signed one in free agency, and that doesn't leave much of a trade market for Justin Fields. So we might all need to adjust our expectations on what a potential Fields trade might look like.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, we look at where the Justin Fields situation stands now as free agency has been officially underway, players are officially signed, and the game of quarterback musical chairs are left with Justin Fields lacking a chair. And every time we get an update from Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter, it becomes a Rorschach test for how you feel about Fields or Caleb Williams and holding on to what you want to happen and trying to find, reading between the lines, the wording from the insiders on what might get you towards the path that you want to see. But we'll kind of look at how the quarterback market played out, what the latest reports are saying, how the Bears might be going about this, and how Ryan Poles might be able to, do right by Justin Fields as he says he'd like to, and whether or not there's still a chance they could keep Fields and maybe also draft Caleb Williams. There's not a clear, obvious outcome of where things go from here because the quarterback landing spots dried up relatively quickly. And particularly as the different dominoes fell, it really played out in a way that was least advantageous to the Bears trading Justin Fields, right? Obviously, Fields is only one quarterback in the quarterback supply and demand thing, and a bunch of other quarterbacks were going to go to a bunch of other places. But in terms of like the teams that may have had the most interest in Fields versus the teams that may have had the least interest in Fields, you didn't have the spots stay open that the Bears would have preferred to stay open. Like the two ideal landing spots from a Bears perspective for Fields were going to be the Atlanta Falcons and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Atlanta goes out and makes Kirk Cousins a big priority for them. The Pittsburgh Steelers get Russell Wilson on an extremely cheap deal, and they go with the veterans, maybe the more proven veterans at those respective spots. That takes out two of your best potential landing spots for Fields. And then a bunch of other teams end up saying, you know what, rather than going all in on a trade for Fields, the Raiders will sign Gardner Minshew instead. Or, the Vikings are a great example that we'll get into in a minute, but, the Vikings sign Sam Darnold, and Baker Mayfield comes back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New York Giants bring in Drew Lock, and all of a sudden you start looking around, and the number of teams that are still available, that still need a quarterback, starts to dwindle even further down. You've got, of course, like the Washington Commanders and New England Patriots sitting at the top of the draft, probably still going to take a quarterback there. And Washington obviously brought in Marcus Mariota, so they've got kind of a backup thing there with Sam Howell already going on there. The Patriots traded away Mac Jones, but did sign Jacoby Brissett as like a veteran quarterback there. So like even those teams addressed the quarterback position. The Vikings brought in Sam Darnold. The Raiders brought in Gardner Minshew. There's some speculation that neither one of those quarterbacks, eliminates them from being in the quarterback conversation. Like really the only true quarterback needy team that has not addressed the quarterback position as of the time of the recording of this podcast is the Denver Broncos. They released Russell Wilson and have not replaced him. They seem to like Jarrett Stidham quite a bit. They've got Ben DiNucci as their backup, but like I've also heard that Denver hasn't really been all that interested in Justin Fields throughout this process anyway. They were not a team that was going to go after pursuing Justin Fields aggressively, and yet they're the only team that has the most wide open of the starting jobs. You could say Sam Darnold to the Minnesota Vikings is also pretty wide open, that the Vikings plan is not likely to just like, hey, Sam Darnold's our guy. Like, I don't think Sam Darnold has earned that at this point. So the Vikings still need a starting quarterback. But it's really hard for me to envision a scenario in which the Chicago Bears would trade Justin Fields to the Minnesota Vikings. I think they'd rather keep him like at that point, or take something very, very small from some other team rather than take more from the Minnesota Vikings. They would take a ridiculous offer from the Vikings, and there's not even really a trade market there for the Vikings to compete with for that spot. And so it just kind of feels like things didn't play out the way the Bears wanted to. Like if Kirk Cousins had re-signed with the Vikings, then what would the Falcons have done? Would they have gone after Fields then? Or if Russell Wilson had gone to the Raiders instead of the Steelers, would they be in the conversation for Fields? Or, any different kind of mechanism here. You could see a quarterback path. Or if Baker Mayfield had left the Buccaneers, would Tampa Bay be in the market for Fields? It seems like the teams that would have wanted Fields found their guys right away and took other quarterbacks away from other teams that might not want Fields as much. Like the less interested in Fields teams didn't end up getting the big name quarterbacks that preclude them from Fields. So the market just didn't really play out in a way that led to a strong trade market for Fields. It could also be a reflection just in general of how the NFL feels about Justin Fields. But I also think it's easy to say, wow, the Raiders preferred the Raiders preferred Gardner Minshew to Fields, or the Washington Commanders preferred Jacoby Brissett. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think it's a one-to-one decision in their head of like, would we rather have Minshew or Fields? That's not how the math works on that, because there's obviously draft pick compensation you would have to give up to trade for Fields, and that you don't have to give up draft compensation for a free agent quarterback that you sign on the street. And then also with the free agent quarterback, you're able to really know what your short-term contract is going to look like for the next season or two. You've got more control over setting that right now with that player, as opposed to trading for Fields, getting the last year of his rookie deal, and then trying to decide quickly on a fifth-year option, probably declining the fifth-year option. So really only trading a draft pick for 1 year of Justin Fields, whereas you can secure a couple years of Gardner Minshew, or you can kind of have more control over the type of contract you're going to get from the veteran you might sign in free agency. And the other side of this is we don't know exactly how aggressive or willing or persistent the Chicago Bears were in trying to trade Justin Fields. And it sounds like, from what we've heard from the likes of Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport, that the Bears weren't aggressively pushing that forward. And people have used those reports to be able to direct this into whatever narrative they prefer in the Justin Fields situation. But we'll take a look at like what's been said and what we know and what we don't know about how the Bears are approaching this Justin Fields trade situation next on Locked On Bears.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago.
Almost hit the wrong button. I almost hit the right button, but they're right next to each other. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at GameTime, the best way to get tickets for all of your favorite live events. Whether it's sports, theater shows, concerts, you name it, any kind of live event, they've got it at GameTime. I use the GameTime app all the time. I just went to a MLS game in Orlando last weekend. That was a ton of fun. I could see my view from my seat, and I actually saved money on my ticket because of their all-in pricing. I didn't have to pay the same kind of fees that you'll pay using, some of the mainstream ticket purchasing and buying right through the team. But I've been to concerts with GameTime. I've been to Bears games with GameTime. It's the best way to buy tickets. I cannot recommend it strongly enough. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem that code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. The Bears are presumably still planning on trading Justin Fields. And most importantly, they are still presumably planning on drafting a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. Like, no matter where you stand on the quarterback debate, when you hear the likes of Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter talk about the Bears' plans, there's definitely some gray area, some lack of specifics on exactly what a Justin Fields trade might look like, when, where, and maybe even the question of if they'll trade Justin Fields. But what you haven't heard Ian Rappaport or Adam Schefter or any of the legitimate insiders say, you haven't heard any of them say anything about the Bears coming off of the decision to draft a quarterback. Like, they all still say, listen, like, the Bears aren't shopping Fields right now, or the Bears haven't been aggressively shopping Fields right now. The Bears aren't close to a trade. The Bears are being patient with Fields and are still trying to decide what they want to do there. But all signs still point to them drafting a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. Like, that's still the direction of the franchise, despite the Fields trade not happening yet. And we can't sit here today and definitively say the Bears will trade Justin Fields, but it seems like that is still strongly their intention to do so. And I just think what happens here is when you don't have a Fields trade and we don't have information as to exactly like what or why, and the Bears are still kind of working through this process, we start to then fill in the blanks of the knowledge that or the information that we don't know with whatever information might best fit our narrative. I've seen a lot of people on social media who are strongly in favor of the Bears keeping Justin Fields, who want to see the Bears keep Justin Fields. And you find the Adam Schefter report, the Ian Rappaport report, that's hard to say, the Ian Rappaport report, the Rap Sheet report of, well, the Bears are, like, basically what they've said is, listen, the Bears are still doing their due diligence on Caleb Williams, right? They still have to go to his pro day. They still got to do their private workout with Caleb Williams. They still want to make 100% sure that Caleb Williams is their guy or which quarterback is going to be their guy in this draft. And so that's why they haven't traded Justin Fields yet. And I think there are Justin Fields, I don't like to tribalize this, the Justin Fields supporters out there, but there are people out there that say, see, the Bears might still keep Justin Fields and trade down from the number 1 overall pick. See, it's still on the table. It's still an option. And like, no one has said that. Ian Rappaport has not said that. Adam Schefter has not said that specifically. You are reading between the lines there and trying to infer that and pull that out of what they said. But no one has said the Bears are doing that or are still considering doing that. All they have said is that the Bears are still doing their homework on the quarterbacks in this draft. And I look at that and I try and check my own bias here and make sure that, okay, I am someone who believes the Bears should draft Caleb Williams and trade Justin Fields. So am I reading too much into those comments when I hear Schefter and Rappaport say the Bears are still doing their due diligence but still plan to draft the quarterback with the 1 overall pick and are taking their time with Fields? Like, that, to me, I read that as saying, okay, Ryan Poles may not be at 100% on Caleb Williams. Maybe it's 90%. Maybe it's 95%. Maybe it's 99.9%. But he might not be at 100% right now. And until he's at 100%, without a doubt, checked all the boxes, crossed all the T's, dot all the I's, get the medicals at the private workout at the pro day, see absolutely everything, be 100% convicted, then they'll trade Justin Fields. But at this point, there's no rush to trade Justin Fields until you're 100% sure. And maybe Ryan Poles, as of today, maybe it's accurate to say, yes, he's not 100% sure about Caleb Williams. But I don't think that's the same as the Bears are leaving the door open to keep Justin Fields. I think while they might not be at 100%, it would take something extreme for the Bears to not draft Caleb Williams at this point and to keep Justin Fields. It would take a criminal matter popping up, an arrest, something above and beyond the normal kind of stuff popping up through the pre-draft process. And even so, they might still just take one of the other quarterbacks then. That's the other thing here. Is even if something crazy comes out about Caleb Williams, does that mean then that they would keep Justin Fields and trade down from 1? Not necessarily. I mean, they might just stay at 1 and take Drake May, or stay at 1 and take Jaden Daniels, or, potentially trade down and still draft a quarterback, but I don't see that as a very likely outcome at this point. So to me, you could try and read through and hold on to any hope that you want that they might still keep Justin Fields and trade down from the number 1 overall pick, but we haven't really gotten any indication of that. The only quote-unquote evidence towards that is that they haven't traded Fields yet, when we thought they probably would have traded Fields by now, and that they haven't been shopping Fields. That doesn't mean they haven't been listening to trade offers for Justin Fields. That doesn't mean there haven't been conversations about trading Justin Fields. But they said the Bears haven't seriously engaged in talks for trading Justin Fields, which to me tells me they've been underwhelmed by the offers, and so they haven't been particularly compelled to get seriously engaged in trade talks. How you define seriously engaged? I think they've had the conversations, and I think if a team had made a good enough offer for Fields, they would have traded him by now. That's the other thing here. It's no one has said that, but no one has said that's not the case. No one has said the Bears got good offers for Fields and said no. Like no one has said the Bears didn't get good offers for Fields, but like no one has said the Bears had a chance to trade him for what they wanted and still said, no, well, we're still deciding on Caleb Williams. I don't think that's happened. I think teams have called, teams have lowballed them, or maybe in the perception of what they wanted for Fields. And they said, well, we're not going to engage in any of these talks because why would we take a 4th-round pick from the Eagles right now when we could wait 3 weeks, be 100% sure about Caleb Williams, and still get that same 4th-round pick from the Philadelphia Eagles or whatever team that might be, right? Like I think the offers came in low and they said, well, screw it. There's no reason for us to take this low offer right now when we still have a little bit more Caleb Williams work to do. So let's take this slow and realize that, okay, the market's a little lower than we thought it was going to be. And darn, Kirk went to Atlanta and Russell went to Pittsburgh. So, all right, like we're not going to get as much for him as we thought. So let's take our time working through this and making sure that we're really going to be 100% sure about all this and then still can kind of get the same rough compensation for Fields 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, than you would have gotten today because all these other teams independently and separately made their decisions on their respective quarterback situations. Like, I think, yes, the Bears have not been super actively trying to move Fields, but I think that doesn't mean they wouldn't have moved Fields for the right offer. If a team came and said, hey, here's a 1st-round pick, I think they'd trade in Justin Fields already and not worried about finishing their quarterback evaluation here. But the fact that the market's been depreciated anyway tells me that I think there's more to this here than just purely evaluating Caleb Williams and making sure that you're 100% sure. Like, that's part of it. That's true, but I think there's also more to it than that. But it all starts to conflict with this idea of like, okay, how can the Bears do right by Justin Fields? As Ryan Poles has kind of said, like, if we go down that path, we want to do right by Justin Fields. And it feels like dragging this out doesn't quite feel that way, but they might have different definitions of doing right by Fields. And is one of those ways potentially the idea of trying to keep him this season because the trade value is not there and draft Caleb Williams and have them both on this roster? We'll kind of go through what those possibilities look like next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, there is no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. It feels hard for the Bears to do right by Justin Fields if they're not able to send him into a starting job where he could try and play well and earn a bigger contract entering free agency either next year or if that team accepts his 5th-year option, then the year after that. Like, when we talked about this idea of Poles wanting to do right by Fields, like that felt like, okay, send him to Atlanta where he'd have a really good supporting cast, or send him to Pittsburgh where he'd have the leadership of Mike Tomlin and the stability of that winning organization. Send him to one of these teams where he can be a starter. Maybe he has to compete with Kenny Pickett or Daniel Jones, the New York Giants, but like presumably he competes, he starts, he plays well, and he's still able to kind of bet on himself and have a successful career and all that stuff. But as those spots start to vanish, and I guess it's worth pointing out that, okay, just because the Giants signed Drew Lock doesn't mean they couldn't still trade for Fields. I mean, they don't have a lot of guaranteed money tied up in Drew Lock. They could cut him or whatever. They could move on from Daniel Jones. Like, sure, any of these teams that signed a free agent, the Raiders with Gardner Minshew could still go after Justin Fields. Like, Kirk Cousins is the main free agent and Russell Wilson. Those are the two guys that mainly eliminated those teams. But some of the other teams that signed free agents could still, in theory, trade for Justin Fields. But all of a sudden it becomes an even harder battle there then, and less of an ideal landing spot, and less doing right by Justin Fields. So if starting quarterback roles are off the table, or more or less off the table, none of the starting options are available for Fields, then what does doing right by Fields look like? Is it sending him to a team where he could eventually kind of work his way into a competition for the starting job, like the Raiders with Minshew, or like the Giants with Drew Lock, if there's other quarterbacks already there? Or is doing right by Fields sending him to a team where, yes, Justin, you're going to have to be the backup quarterback, but we can send you to a team like the Philadelphia Eagles that might have an offense that's a little bit more effective for you. Or the Baltimore Ravens, like an offense that's going to be able to find ways to use you in the running game, but there's no guarantee you're going to get playing time at either of those spots. But if you do, it's a good spot for you. And maybe that time on the bench, you can learn from that quarterback and improve and develop. What does doing right by Justin Fields look like in either of those in a trade scenario? Or is there a way to do right by Justin Fields and keep him? We've had the conversation before, and I still think it's a good idea. Like, if you can find a way to make it work, keeping Justin Fields and drafting Caleb Williams, and either making it a quarterback competition, or even better, sit Caleb Williams for a whole season, start Justin Fields this year, or maybe at the trade deadline or whatever. If Fields plays well, you can get better value from him then. Is that doing right by Justin Fields to keep him here and draft Caleb Williams? It depends on how you communicate it. It depends on how you run that quarterback room. It doesn't feel realistic at this point. It doesn't feel super likely at this point. But maybe the trade timeline necessitates that a little bit, because maybe you do still plan on trading Justin Fields, but that trade doesn't materialize right away. Maybe you get all the way to draft day, and all right, you take Caleb number 1, and Justin Fields is still under contract because you're still looking for that right trade partner. Because maybe you look in the draft and say, okay, like, we want to see where these rookie quarterbacks go, and then, okay, if the Denver Broncos miss out on the rookie they wanted with the 12th pick or whatever whatever pick they have there in the first round, number 12, okay, yeah, number 12 pick in the round, then all of a sudden does Denver change their mind and go, yeah, you know what, we weren't really interested in Fields before, but we missed out on J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix or whoever they identified there. Now we want Justin Fields, let's make a deal. Does Ryan Poles have to play the long game there? Or, one of these other teams like a Seattle Seahawks or the New York Jets? If Aaron Rodgers is going to be a vice presidential candidate, is that going to make them a suitor for Justin Fields? It's ridiculous, and I don't want to give it any more time or thought than that. But like, that could create. I hate to say it, but like, that could create a starting spot where if Aaron Rodgers, I have no idea how this would work logistically. Maybe he would still try and play and run for office, but like, if that actually happens, if the Jets job became available, like that would become a potential landing spot for Fields. Like, but you got to wait it out. Or maybe none of those teams want him and it's all backup quarterback offers still. So you go through OTAs and mini camps and maybe even into training camp. Could Justin Fields' value go up if you get to training camp and quarterback on X team gets hurt during training camp? Maybe not even a season-ending injury, but during training camp, quarterback sprains his knee. Quarterback, bruises the shoulder or pulls a muscle and is going to miss a couple of months. Would then a team a little bit more desperate for a quarterback look around and say, man, all the free agents suck, but we can go get Justin Fields? Like, would the Bears be able to hold on to Fields through training camp? Like, would he practice? Like, would you pretend like you're going to keep him? Or would you say all along, hey, we're going to trade him, but he's still here? Like, it all feels really, really messy. It doesn't really feel like doing right by Justin Fields if the plan is to trade him later. Like, I think the best ways to do right by Fields is to send him to a spot where he can be a great backup, send him to a spot where he can compete for starter, but that might not be available, or keep him, but be very, very clear and upfront communication, transparency on, okay, Justin, we're drafting Caleb Williams. And either, hey, we're drafting Caleb Williams, but we want you to start. You're our starter. Caleb's going to sit behind you, but you are our starting quarterback, and be very clear about that. Or, hey, we're going to draft Caleb Williams, and we're going to start him, but you can be our backup, and we need you ready, but you're not going to be a starter, and be very, very clear about that. And then I guess kind of let him decide if that's a role he wants to accept or not. And then I guess you would, if he says, no, I'm not going to be the backup here, trade me, then you trade him. But like, to me, that's all that's left for doing right by Justin Fields. Like, you're not going to cut him. You're not going to save any salary cap space. You're going to take whatever draft compensation you can get from whatever team might be interested in trading for him. And if you've reached the point where, okay, you're not going to be a starter anywhere, then there's a lot more options for teams that might be willing to trade for him as a backup quarterback. I mean, he would be one of the best or most highly sought after backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And you can look around the league. I mean, no matter how good or bad you feel about Justin Fields, like he would be one of the best backup quarterbacks in football. Like, whether you rank him as the 20th best quarterback in football or the 40th best quarterback in football, even if you're at 40, that's still the 8th best backup quarterback in the NFL. Like, that's still a desired value. And when Trey Lance gets a 4th round pick for the 49ers to go to the Dallas Cowboys, like, that's kind of where I'm adjusting my expectations for a Justin Fields trade. If Fields is going to go be a developmental backup somewhere, then I'm starting at the Trey Lance price. Say, okay, you gave a 4th for Lance. We want at least a 4th for Fields. That sucks. That's not what you wanted. We've been talking about a 2nd round pick plus through most of the offseason, but it doesn't feel like that market has come to fruition. And with even fewer teams needing starting quarterbacks, you're not trading a 2nd round pick for a backup. So if no one's going to trade for him as a starter, you get into backup trade compensation, and that's a 4th. Maybe you get a 4th plus a 7th, or even a 4th plus a 6th, or a 4th and a future pick. I mean, it's kind of what you'd have to hope for at this point, because Fields is a little bit more of a known commodity than Trey Lance, but Lance was drafted earlier, but in the same draft. They're about the same age, but Lance has less experience and maybe is more malleable. I mean, you can start to nitpick on how you might separate the value there, but like, Fields should be worth more than Trey Lance. It's just a matter of how much more and how badly one of these teams might want him. But like, if you're a team like the Eagles in win now mode, or the Ravens, like, is it worth giving up a 4th round pick for a backup quarterback when that 4th round pick could help you win now more than a backup quarterback might help you win now, versus a team that still would want a better backup but isn't as centrally focused on today? I mean, I don't look around, like the Indianapolis Colts just add Joe Flacco, but like, as a backup to Anthony Richardson to replace Gardner Minshew would be a spot that you might think of. Or maybe I was going to say the Buffalo Bills, but they're still kind of in win now mode too. But something like that, one of these teams that would be interested in Fields but also still willing to give up something reasonable in terms of draft compensation. Like, it's not going to be what you want. It's going to feel like a big time sell low, but at the end of the day, that's kind of how this plays out. And I don't know that Ryan Poles could have done a lot differently in that. Could he have been more aggressive about trying to push a Fields trade earlier? Maybe. Would that have produced a 2nd and a 3rd round pick for Fields? Probably not. So, like, we don't know exactly what the market was and what those conversations were, but one way or another, it's not going to pan out the way we all wanted it to, and we're just going to have to accept that. And hey, I guess your consolation prize is that you're going to get the number 1 overall pick quarterback in this year's draft, which is like great. We can be excited about that too. We'll also maybe disappointed with how things have played out with Justin Fields. I'd love to hear what you think is going to happen with Fields. Let us know in the comments here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel. You can tweet us at Locked On Bears, post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. That's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Coming back tomorrow. Keep making Locked On Bears your first listen every day. Every time there's a big Bears free agent signing, we'll be talking about it. There wasn't really a major one on Wednesday, so that's why we got to talk about Fields a little bit more today. But as the moves keep coming, we will certainly keep talking about them. And we got to talk about at some point how this free agent outcome has affected the Bears' draft plans. And like, spoiler alert, like, some of the teams picking ahead of the Bears in the draft have really invested at wide receiver, which could increase the chances that one of these wide receivers falls to the Bears at number 9. So we're going to talk about that here coming up very soon on the podcast, plus a whole lot more free agency talk with some of our friends on the Locked On Podcast Network. We'll talk to Locked On Eagles about Kevin Byard and DeAndre Swift. We'll talk to Locked On Titans about Kevin Byard as well, and any other Bears free agents will be on top of that. We got to talk to either Locked On Chargers or maybe Locked On Rams or Seahawks about Gerald Everett as well. So we'll get you up to date on all of these Bears free agent signings from some of our local experts. And every time, no matter which players we're talking about or which podcast hosts we're talking to, we're always going to find time for you to bear down.